All right, welcome back, everyone. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I am joined by my Orthodox brother, James Kourtides. How you doing today, brother?
I'm well, man. Thanks for having me on, and you got the name perfect. That's great, dude. You didn't even ask me. You just like rolled it off.
Well, I the other day when I was streaming with brother Augustine, Michael Witkoff, I was live and I got real nervous getting ready to pronounce your last name because but I went with what I thought it was, and so I'm thankful that that is actually how we pronounce it.
Right. No, yeah, man. That's right. And I'm actually talking with him Saturday. So
Oh,
interesting.
great. Well, go ahead and tell everybody what it is that you do. One of the things, and I have your link in the video description right now, is you have a podcast, and you have a great podcast. You had Paggio on there.
Mhm.
I've been on there. You've had multiple and very interesting conversations. Can you just tell everybody what it is about your podcast and what it is that you do? And then everybody click the link in the description and go subscribe.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. So I started the podcast portion of the channel probably in December. I got 13, 14 episodes now. But before that, and it was really during the start of the pandemic where I was working from home and I started reading. I read a lot. My background's in philosophy. I have a philosophy degree and I've been reading a lot. And I just thought to myself, I was reading Christ, the Eternal Tao, that particular book.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I'm going to read this from cover to cover on YouTube. And I don't know why. I didn't have anything else to do. So instead of just reading it to myself, I actually read it once myself and then just cover to cover started reading it. And then I got some good feedback. And then instead of reading books to myself, I just started reading books out loud in front of my phone and uploading it. A lot of different kind of philosophy. And it runs the gamut, like from French postmodernism, Heidegger, German idealism, a lot of continental philosophy. And then it just happened to be when I was really getting into the church fathers at the same time. So I started reading from Father or Dr. Tim Petitz's Orthodox, Beauty Will Save the World. A beautiful book, man. Absolutely mind blowing.
I haven't read that. I need to check that out. Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Let me write it down first.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
I
Yeah.
have to write everything down. I'm a writer down for anything
Yeah.
that stays with me. So
Me too. I have my little pen and paper here too.
say the name of that book one more time.
It's Tim Petitzas, Patitsas, and it's The Ethics of Beauty is what it's called. Deep into Orthodox, like every page, it's a thick book, and every page, there's no fluff in it, is mind-blowingly deep in terms of orthodoxy in our modern age, and makes it really relevant. It's out of print, like it was released last year, and it's hard to find a copy. I think there's another few thousands that are being printed this week, actually. Beautiful book, man. It just kind of blew my mind. So I started reading from that, and I got kind of all over the place. E. Michael Jones, Logos Rising. Started reading from that. I got a lot of responses from that, more of that. I started reading Father Seraphim Rose's his life and works. Huge impact on me, and it was having the impact on me as I was reading it in front of the camera. So I think that played a part, in people resonating with it.
It really well. Let me say something to that. I don't mean to cut you off,
No.
but just reading out loud, because I do a lot of reading on this channel. Shoot, I was just reading my grandmother's poetry the other day, and I swear I had read everything before I even went online, and then reading some of those things, just hearing it out loud, it hits a little differently when you read just really anything. And that is a little underrated. So when I read online, I've already read it before I read it, but after reading it and saying it out loud, because you don't normally do that when you're by yourself, I don't know. It's a little bit of a different experience, even for the reader.
Yeah. I've had people tell me that they read with me, and I won't read an entire book a lot of times. And people will message me like, "Oh, please continue reading this book. I was reading it along with you." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that, people were doing that." And a lot of it was for selfish reasons you read something, but you want to reread it, but don't have time. So if you record it when you're driving, you can just play your recording of you reading it 1.25 speed or something. Right. And it kind of helps with that. A lot of people kind of resonated with the readings. Rene Girard was a big one. There's a few books I read from cover to cover. I See Satan Fall Like Lightning was one of those that hit me right in the chest. and I read from cover to cover. And then I got into reading a lot of McLuhan's books, a lot of his work. And then I started doing analysis and whatnot. And so all of my videos are in playlists, which I don't think a lot of people find, like, because it's really scattered if you don't put it in playlists.
Right.
So like I'll have an author and then I'll do all the books that I read and analysis and whatnot. So Rene Girard, Marshall McLuhan, both converts to Catholicism later in their lives. Rene Girard was way later, after he went into he was a postmodern ninja, like deep into psychoanalysis, deep into literature. And at the other end of that, he came out converted to Christianity. And that's really like, whoa, you went through that and you had that conversion, and his work and his insights are still working through me right now. And he has this story of, he kind of has his interpretation of the story of Peter's denial of Christ from the Gospels. And I didn't know that it was this story that really kind of laid the seed for me to start the podcast, The Rooster Crow, which I started in December, kind of to bring the long story short. I have a workplace where I'm at right now, and behind our workplace, started here maybe in October, there's a Antioch Greek Orthodox church, a really small one with a big like field.
Mm-hmm.
It's called St. Elias. And, my son was born last year. His name's Eli, which a lot of different resonances.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So, they have one
Go ahead.
They have one singular rooster back there that I never saw him, but he would crow in the mornings when I come to work. And I had this idea of starting a podcast because of the channel. And one time it crowed. And as I was driving, like 15 minutes later, it came to me, that'd be a good name for a podcast. And then I was thinking, what happened when the rooster crowed? It was simultaneously the worst and the best day of Peter's life, right? He realized that he disregarded and turned his back on God, on Jesus, and he was his closest disciple. And this story really just still hits me like the Peter, the rock, his closest disciple, turned his back on him to follow the crowd, right? Because he was asked by, 3 different people outside of the city, are you with Jesus? He says, no. He's asked again, are you with him? No, you have that accent. And then the third question was from a young girl, and the Gospels say a young woman, right? And asks him, are you Galilean? Are you with Jesus? And he says, no. And then the rooster crows, and he comes to this realization of what he's done, broke his spirit. But it was sort of his road to Damascus moment, right? Where it gave him the opportunity for repentance. Mm-hmm. So I saw that as what's happening now in our kind of modern world. And I thought to myself, we need to find people that are like the rooster's crow call of warning, like, hey, stuff's getting weird, but not just that, or showing ways forward and paths forward and giving some hope. And that's what started the podcast, essentially.
Wow, brother, I did not know that was the symbolism behind, because we didn't get into it. For those of you who did know, I did a podcast episode number 13 on the Rooster's Crow with James, but we didn't really get into the name. But wow, that's actually a really powerful symbolic message behind it. In regards to even what the message, I mean, you are the rooster trying to bring people to a realization of where we're at in the world, who they are, and their relationship ultimately to God.
Yeah. No, and I'm still wrestling with this idea, because what's happening now is, Christianity is being effaced and it's being ridiculed more than ever. And it's, in America and everywhere. So it's like, just like Peter turned his back on Christ, like the world is turning its back on Christianity, and the roosters are crowing, and, and it's just about having discernment and being able to pay attention to that like, the old New Age awakening, spiritual awakening, ascension, right? That's not false, completely false. It's tapping into something that's real, right? But of course, it's being twisted in really weird ways. But the rooster waking up Peter to what he's done is this idea that kind of came to me. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's a great segue into what I wanted to get into today. From obviously those who see the title, it's returning home from the New Age to Orthodoxy, and James, being Greek, obviously was born into the Orthodox Church. But as we'll find out here in a few minutes, you have an incredible story of really leaving the faith, and going in your own sort of spiritual exploratory phase, getting into Reiki, getting into New Age, getting into psychedelics, even watch some of the previous videos on my past YouTube channel. So
Hmm.
totally, we were enmeshed in the entire same worldview, the same culture, subculture, and I. So eventually, you come back to Orthodoxy, and you've come back home. So that's why returning home for me, everybody says that. Oh, I'm getting baptized. I'm getting chrismated. Welcome home. For you, it's
Hmm.
way more familiar. You know, everybody has to get over the unfamiliar hurdle of Orthodoxy, who are usually converts. But for you, it's literally sinking back into what was familiar the whole time, just not realizing that it was also true.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And it's not, I'm still coming back to Orthodoxy, and it's a unique situation because now I'm married, and I have three kids, and all of a sudden dad wants to go to church, and I haven't been regularly to church. My folks moved here, immigrated from Greece in late 70s. I was born in 1981, and my parents owned restaurants, Greeks owning restaurants, go figure. So I had my yaya and my papu and my aunt who I would go to church with as a child. And I would go a lot as a child. And then it just kind of fell away. My parents got a divorce. Grandma and grandpa moved back to Greece, and I stopped going. And then we just went through a tumultuous time. Like the divorce had a really, and just really impacted me profoundly, like, in a really, a profound way, as it does, and got into a lot of trouble in high school, drinking, drugging, just doing a lot
Right.
of crazy stuff. And somehow I found myself at the University of Florida. I think I applied there to get off probation. After high school, I got in trouble, and I never really cared for school in high school. But I guess I had an interest, and applied to the University of Florida after going to a junior college and got accepted. And I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do here? And I got in after the admission date, and there was only like two courses available. I had a political science degree that I was looking at, and there were political theory courses, and I had to take two of them. And as I was advised like, oh, those are tough courses. You're not, having two of those they'll be a little too much. And it turns out that I found, life initially in political philosophy, and found my passion for philosophy there, kind of
Mm-hmm.
out of nowhere. Political philosophy, and then really got into existentialism, and then deeply into continental philosophy, especially the work of Martin Heidegger, and the French postmodernists, mostly the work of Gilles Deleuze. You ever
Mm.
heard of him?
I'm not too
He's the
familiar with his work, actually.
Yeah, he's his work. I spent years reading his. It's very difficult. I bought every one of his books, and I've read them on my channel, and it's very
Mm.
abstract stuff. But I think he was really tapping into, kind of spiritual materialism in a real sense, because he was writing in the 60s, the 70s, in the milieu of French postmodernity. So that he had to do whatever, like, he couldn't talk about the transcendent, but I think what he did was enfold the transcendent into the immanent, right? And
Right.
then he put seeds in there for people in the future that could now reconsider the transcendent to find in his work. Don't think he knew he was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Really influenced by Nietzsche. His life, he died of suicide. Well, they say he was leaping out because he had a really terrible lung issues in the early 90s. He was, grasping outside of his Paris apartment to get air, and he fell and kind of died. Um, it's interesting to see a lot of these people like Nietzsche, yeah, a lot of these people, how their lives end, how their actual lives turn out,
Right.
tells you a little bit about what they were, what they were looking at, in a sense. Like when it ends in disaster like that, it's interesting. I use that as a beacon to kind of situate my understanding of what their philosophy really is, in a
Right.
sense. But I got into that, and just kind of fumbling around. I got done with school. I was addicted to opiates. There was a lot of terrible stuff that happened in our area. Opiates came through in Florida in the early 2000s. I was functionally addicted to
Well,
them.
so how old were you when you're graduating from college? You've just done the philosophy. You're really interested in the foundations of contemporary progressive thought.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I was 25, 24, around there. It's a little bit late. I was going to go to law school.
mm,
Took my LSATs, got a pretty good score, and applied, and wasn't able to get in anywhere because of my. I had a background. I had from partying. I had 2 DUIs. Just run-ins with the law back then, and that was too soon, and it caused me not able to get into law school, which was a big hit. My
right.
folks wanted me to do that. I thought that's what I wanted to do, but wasn't able to do that. And then when I graduated, I got a great offer for AT&T's leadership development program in management. They were paying me great.
Hmm.
They gave me the offer. And then my background, again, this was 2007, 2008, came and bit me in the butt, and they rescinded the offer. That just fell into kind of a depression. Had my then girlfriend, I swear she's an angel, man, stuck with me, and ended up getting into kind of the healthcare field. And then that's when I found like Eastern mysticism through Ken Wilber and his integral theory. You're
Right.
familiar with him?
Yep. Yeah, he was.
Yes.
Well, he was pretty popular in the Bay Area,
Mm-hmm.
because that was where that was his old stomping grounds, right? So when I was over at Berkeley, we actually devoted one day in the new religious movements to that sort of milieu of writing,
Mm-hmm.
as a sort of beginnings of a new religious movement, in California, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So, but
That was his whole thing, integral spirituality,
mhm,
kind of taking the four quadrants, and you would say something like 100 humans can't be 100% wrong, right? So there's a little bit of truth in every, kind of religious syncretism, right? There's a little bit of truth in each religion, and we need to, through second tier thinking, right, which is the
right,
systematic integral way of thinking. You can take all of the religions and all of the traditions, and not take them and transcend and include them into a broader kind of religion that will be the religion of the future, which I was really attracted to at that time,
right.
hearing that.
Which
And he was
was
into,
which was kind of a contemporary build upon the traditionalist school of Rene Guénon and
mhm.
the other perennialists. This general idea, Wilbur was kind of taking that and adding to it again in a new age sort of context. For
Yeah,
those of you
definitely.
listening, just trying to give perspective.
Yeah, and he was into Buddhism and Zen, and he had this video. You can still find it on YouTube where he had this EKG set up on his head, like all those diodes, and he showed how he can stop his brain waves through meditation. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, whoa, look at that. So introduced to meditation. This was probably around 2010.
Mm,
Zen Buddhism. Really got into studying and thinking about Buddhism, and the power now was kind of somewhat related to that. Your thoughts are just kind of, your thoughts just appear. If you don't focus on them, they go away, and you can live in kind of this awakened state, in a sense. So I was kind of attracted to that. And then working through, I started doing well at work. My parents are Greek immigrants, and I remember I started making good money, like about six figures, and it was such a big deal to me. Like, I remember cried calling my mom, because they struggled, immigrants, and making more money than I ever thought I would make. And it was just such a big deal to me. And I ended up in 2013, I bought a brand new house and a brand new BMW on the same day. The same day.
dang.
Yeah.
So
Not bragging.
right, okay. But we got to follow this timeline. So
Yeah.
2010, you're getting out of college. You got your philosophy degree. You also have had some run-ins, opioids, two DUIs. Not able to get into law school, get into the
Mm-hmm.
AT&T manager program. Now 2013, you're making six figures, have a new house, new car. Are you married, and do you have kids in 2013?
Yeah. Well, I didn't, I got an offer through the AT&T leadership program, but then they rescinded it because the background came after that, which was
Oh,
a
that's right,
big
that's right,
blow.
that's right. Okay.
And I had a dream the night before that I got something in the mail that telling me that it was rescinded. And then that morning I got it in the mail. It was the weirdest thing. So ended up getting into the healthcare
Premonition.
field. Yeah, right. It's weird. Not a good feeling. And I got into kind of the healthcare field, working with nurses and medically fragile children, providing nursing around the clock care in the home. I'm still in
Okay.
that field now. And I'm doing well there. And then I got married in 2012. And then we got the house in 2013. And then my son was born, my first son, in 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I
And
see.
that changed everything again, just a huge, just a huge hit of responsibility and reverence and appreciation. And then, so the year after, I took my family to Greece for the first time, my wife and my then like 10-month-old child in
So this is 14 or 15?
2014.
14.
And it was just a beautiful, no, 2015, the year after he was born. So
Mm.
he was almost a year. First steps he took were there at my yaya's house. We actually got him on video, and just such a powerful experience being there. We were there for almost a month, and I felt like it was just it was a huge impact on me there. But I still was dealing with residual issues of addiction. I was Adderall, not opiates anymore, not as intense, but still working through these things. And then I came back from Greece, and I was making really good money, and I just became extremely unhappy. Started buying into this 9 to 5s or BS. I'm not living my potential. I'm not, doing kind of what, you know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
into that. And then that's when it kind of got strange. I found myself in a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncture office, because I've tried so much to different psychologists or whatever to get rid of this addiction. Right. And I went and got acupuncture, and it was seemingly like overnight, had like an awakening experience. Like I had just these crazy feelings, these waves of, it's hard to explain, that came through me, and they kept coming every time I'd go get acupuncture. It would last for like 3-4 days, where I felt like I was like, I felt just different, like in this weird sense, like an awakening, like it just felt like an opening, like a clarity and whatnot. And from there, I was like, wow, what is this chi thing? Like I was reading Taoism, but then I experienced it, what chi was. And I was like, whoa. And I looked for Qigong. I started researching it, and I found a Qigong master in the area, and I started going daily as much as I can and just absorbing. And this was 2015, 16, absorbing and taking Qigong classes and studying traditional Chinese medicine like heavily. Everything else went by the wayside, and I just started researching it. And it was so profound and doing really deep. This get into the esoteric meditation, doing Taoist alchemy, connecting with heaven and earth, connecting with the 5 elements, using, awakening the Dantian, the lower Dantian, opening the different acupuncture points, doing the small water wheel. I was having tremendous effects. And I went about 6 months where I didn't eat anything but just literally fruits and berries. And the whole time, my poor wife is like, what is happening with this guy?
Were you losing
like,
a bunch of weight being a fruitarian
yeah.
there?
I got super skinny, shaved my head. I probably lost 30 pounds and stopped, but it was very good, for me in particular, but for my family, they're like, what the heck's happening? And then, I had this idea, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to start a business where I'm going to teach meditation and this Qigong. And I got a Reiki certificate where, that's kind of hands-on healing, where you're kind of introduced to it, and it works. Like that stuff is not, the reason I stay away from it now is because it works. Like I would do healings on people, and, they'd shake and they'd start bawling their eyes out. And I would do it on myself all the time. I would do it on my wife, and, seeing clients here and there. And it's crazy. Like it works, but it's, you're dealing with stuff that we're not capable of really understanding. So you're channeling in a sense, and really got into that understanding of channeling. I would actually do channeling and do writings and then do videos. And it's easy to do that when you're not eating really anything but fruits and nuts and whatnot, and really meditating. It opens you up to the spiritual realm, the spiritual spaces. And I had a lot of, unique experiences where it was, entities and different things like that. And it felt really good on the inside. But, when I look back at it now, that's the first time I really talked about it. And looking back at it now, it's, from the outside looking in, it just looked like probably like a breakdown, which it kind of was in a sense.
So what year did you quit your job?
2016.
2016. When did you begin to experiment with psychedelics? I mean, clearly, I imagine you probably did much younger, given some of your previous experiences. But where did psychedelics relate to this Eastern mysticism and healing practices?
Yeah, my first time I did was when I was maybe 16, 17. And then I had this one singular experience that I remember it pretty good. It's like I was with some buddies, and one of my buddies had a liquid LSD in a little Visine bottle,
Oh
right?
boy.
And he thought it'd be funny to overdose me, right? And he just like put a bunch of drops in my tongue, and I didn't expect what happened there. And what happened was just crazy. So like we were at, it's hard to talk about it, trip so long ago. It's going to sound like word salad almost, but like
Right.
we're in this room with like 6 or 7 of us, and all of a sudden, two of the people were twins, two girls, and my buddy, and all of a sudden they started talking, and they were all talking, and everybody's next word would start with the letter. So somebody would say a word that starts with A and then B, and like the A, B, C, D, and they talking in circles, and they started doing crazy stuff like measuring each other, how far away they were from each other. Like, what the heck is happening? And then those two girls, these two twins, sweet girls, they took me in the bathroom, and I remember just going into space and just like hyperspace. I don't know what happened in that bathroom, but it was like just this got into this strange hyperspace where it's just like stars, almost like Star Wars flying by, and a lot of other stuff that happened that I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, and so I just got out of that bathroom, and I told my buddy, I'm like, yo, we're leaving now. We're leaving now. I started flipping out, and I had to drive,
You.
drive to my like an hour away, half hour away, actually, not even.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I'm driving, and there's the trees are like all just literally serpents, just coiling serpents. It's just insanity. And then I went to my aunt's house, and I'm telling my completely sober cousins, like, listen, these guys put something on my tongue to join this cult. They put something on my tongue to join whatever they're doing. This is crazy. And I'm telling them all this stuff, and I'm trying to hide it from my aunt. And I ended up through the night, as it was wearing off, my arm kept like vibrating, and I was wearing off, and I just realized there's no cult. And then I kind of realized what happened. That's kind of like a short story of that trip. So that was my first real big experience. And then that was probably 2000 and 1999 ish.
Mm-hmm.
Just a terrible, terrible experience, probably because there was a lot of bad stuff happening in my life, right? Set and setting.
Right.
And then being kind of overdosed at that point. It's
Right. And not anticipating. That's a big one, right? Surprise dosing somebody.
yeah,
That's rarely going to go extremely well, unless
yeah,
again the set and setting is just perfect.
yeah. It was stuck in my memory. And then cut to 2016, ended up finding out how to, this was a little bit later, 17 ish. I started growing. I might have started growing my own mushrooms. I may or may not have done that, and then I grew them, I cultivated them,
Allegedly.
and yeah, allegedly, in a dream, and then I had a harvest, and I took a little bit, maybe like a gram, and did a meditation, and it was beautiful. I was like, all these feelings of love for my wife happened, and just was a good experience. And then in 2018, I was like, I'm going to do a heroic dose. I was really into 2017. I was into Terrence McKenna and Alan Watts. Listened to every one of his videos, every one of your videos talking about Terrence McKenna and all the different fractal patterns, and really into DMT, and learning about DMT. And I remember watching the DMT videos on YouTube, and these people would be like, yeah, they were saying the craziest things. And in my head, I'm like, I know what they're talking about. Like popping out and seeing the earth from above, and having people saying, oh, look, you're doing well. I can't believe you're doing it. You're doing it. Like, I never had that experience I could remember, but I was like, whoa, I know what they're talking about. So I was like, oh, this seems very, very interesting. But I could never find any, I tried to, I may or may not have tried to get some with Bitcoin. I had bought 2 Bitcoin at very cheap, and I lost my kind of Bitcoin account. That's another story.
Yeah.
I never got my hands on it, and did this kind of heroic dose situation where I had a terrible experience, and that was the last time I did it, 2018. I think that closed the chapter on the psychedelics in 2018. So, after I started the business, I spent a lot of savings trying to build the business. It's not really, I was used to having a 6-figure income, and trying to build a business from scratch, this weird esoteric stuff. I thought that, it helped me so much, everybody's just going to love it. But no, that's not the case. And it didn't work out. And then from there, like, I found, the Jordan Peterson phenomenon popped up,
Mm-hmm.
right? 2016. I was into him before he was real popular. So he kind of, watching his videos kind of brought me down to kind of to earth a little bit in a strange way. And then his Bible series really got me to, with these new kind of spiritual insights, reconsider looking at the Bible. And from there, I found Jonathan Peugeot and his Symbolic World group. And that was probably the most recent impactful moment where it just resonated so much what he was saying and how he was saying it. And really got into that. And because of him, I got into the church fathers. I'm like, well, where's he getting this stuff? Like, I would ask him, what books do you read? Like, and he's like, oh, it's on the church fathers. I had no idea what church fathers were. I'm like, what do you mean church fathers? Like, what does that mean? From a Greek Orthodox background, so I found them, and Father Seraphim Rose had a huge impact. And then, I started considering Orthodoxy again and started talking with the priest at the church that I used to go to, and on my way kind of back into the Orthodox church. Family is willing and interested in going, and then COVID hit. And we didn't end up getting into going in a regular basis really, and trying again now to, find to start going regularly. And it's tough with our schedule, but we're at the point now where, we're doing the Lent, we're following fast. I just actually started really following the Wednesday and Friday fast and praying heavily. The last year and a half of praying, using the saints and the fathers and praying a lot, rooted me back into home. Like, brought me home. Mm-hmm. And something that I'm cognizant of is, how do I know I'm not going through another, experience like I did before, where I felt everything seemed so real?
Right.
How do I know that I'm not doing that now? You know what I'm saying? It's like,
no,
how is this not another?
Same. In fact, my ex-girlfriend, who was Ukrainian, with the whole Orthodoxy thing, her big beef, because she had bad experiences with clergy back home. She saw corruption in the church, so she wouldn't. When she saw Orthodoxy, it wasn't reading Maximus the Confessor. It was the bishop or the priest that she met that was an absolute con artist. And she had this terrible opinion of Orthodoxy, though she went for Pascha, she went for Christmas. And then I, not Orthodox, I'm psychedelic, which she's not into psychedelics. And then I slowly give up the psychedelics and become Orthodox, and she's really not into the Orthodoxy thing either. Yeah, it was difficult trying to navigate that transition, because she saw me becoming Orthodox as really just fulfilling another ultimate value set, right? And that was her critique to me. Oh, all you're doing is replacing all your, that psychedelics are going to save the world and all this other stuff about, human evolution and all this stuff with consciousness. You're just taking that, and now you're just saying that Orthodoxy is true. And again, it's like, no, I don't think that's what I'm doing, but it makes you question yourself. Is that what I'm doing? Am I going to be one of the questions you asked me is if I'm going to be Orthodox in 5 years. When we were talking, it's like, geez, I don't know. I never expected to be here. So, this was never part of the plan that I projected in the future. When I was 20 some years old and saw what I was going to be at 31, it was a professor that was probably very progressive and into all the psychedelic stuff and doing that whole thing. And now I'm here. And so it's like, where am I going to be in 5 years? I don't know. I just know that this is actually what I authentically believe to be true. I've given up other opportunities, other things to throw all my eggs in this basket. So I imagine, I'm how do you answer that question for yourself regarding, is this just another fill-in of something of ultimate value and that eventually you may move on? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. And something that is really the signposts that I use is the quality of the relationships that I have within myself, and then specifically with my family, with my wife, and how I am as a father. Not just how I think I am, but just how how the relationships are going well, and then my external family, broader family, and then family, community, neighbors. How am I with my neighbors and friends? How am I with my coworkers? How am I with strangers that I meet? Or people. I could tell that something was shifting in terms of the quality of the conversations that I was having with people, and even strangers, where I was genuinely caring about them and like conversations would not be not deep like these type of conversations, but not superficial like, just getting really into, meaningful conversations were happening more and more, and just relationships were getting better. And I think the church fathers kind of say this too, like you can use that as a barometer to see how, if you're on the right path, if you're not missing the mark, is how your relationships with human beings are going. And I'd say that's what I'm using as a main barometer. And that they've never been better, like deeper, meaningful, significant. Same thing with work. Like I care about my work. I'm in a position where I can help, under, medically fragile children, kids, 6, 5, 4-year-olds that have brain cancer that are on hospice. Like, and these kids are amazing. Like the way that they handle these terminal situations, they are like angels. Like when you experience them, and it's difficult for the family and it's difficult for the nurses around them. But some of the nurses I think are legitimately angels as well. But they just have such a big impact in me. And I feel like I'm in the right place. My wife's a ICU nurse, a critical care nurse as well. And, our relationship has gotten way better. Right. And with my kids, way better. Where before it was about me and these experiences and chasing these highs, these spiritual highs. Right. No matter if I thought that I'm helping other people or trying to help others heal themselves, that's not what the case was. It was just really a spiritual inflated ego, where here it's like, it's the opposite, where it's like, and that's why I'm mindful about my channel and becoming, not being, humility is a big thing for me. Is trying to be humility, and through prayer and continuously trying to love my neighbor as much as I can. Through God, like God, I'm gonna try to be a vessel. I have prayers where, your will, Lord Jesus Christ, enlighten my darkness, guide my will, teach me to pray, and pray yourself within me. Like I do that prayer daily before
that's a beautiful
conversations one. And just try to be there for friends and family.
Right.
And that's going good. And the quality of those relationships are becoming more rich. So that's how I'm kind of using that as a barometer. But you never know. And just to speak quickly, it's interesting. I had this idea that the whole process of the logos manifesting in the world, right? The truth in little tiny seeds was manifesting in Taoism and Buddhism and Zen and Hebrew. The Native Americans, the Nordic, like the Hebrews, right? These aren't wrong, completely wrong. They're just incomplete, right? They're little pieces of the logos. And then, the logos became man. Right. So it's like, here's the truth right here. Here's a little instance of it. Here's the truth. Right. There's nowhere else to go. Christ is the end. Like, what I'm saying? There's nowhere else to go. Like especially now with, you see the disintegration of institutions, and scientism is running its course in terms of there's no there's no structure of meaningful reality there. It's that's why I think a lot of people are kind of looking towards more authentic, traditional type of things, but it's not an easy path, and it's not something to do without really doing some deep soul searching and relying on others that have been there,
And I think with the relativism of our society, things are always changing with time. And so one of the appeals of Orthodoxy is young men are they're searching for what's objective. And the church and its resistance to change, is making an objective claim in its existence. And it appears then when you witness it, although there are plenty of problems happening right now in the church, especially with COVID and everything, but it appears throughout history as a historical enterprise that this particular organization is trying to protect something that is objective, which then intrigues the spiritual seeker. Especially if they've already done the esoteric, they've done the occult, they've done the New Age healing, or they've done the psychedelics. There's not a whole lot of other places to turn. Witkoff, we spoke with him a couple of days ago, and he was into Freemasonry and practicing Kabbalah and different forms of magic. And it's like, once you've done all that and you've done the drug, and somehow, for the people who are honest, Orthodoxy represents itself, and then the depth that one encounters within it is usually, for me, unexpected. Never thought I'd find it here, but it's so deep, and it continues to be so deep. And the more you read, the more dots you connect, the more you can see. But then you also see how much you don't know in history and theology and the church fathers and this or that, or then just living your life as Orthodox, right? Because all that stuff's really secondary to then just changing your life, which is the hardest part. The giving up is the hardest part of following Christ and becoming Orthodox.
Yeah. No, definitely. And that's the thing. It's easy to chase spiritual experiences because they feel good, right? And it's easy to inflate your ego, like, oh, look at me, I'm got all this esoteric knowledge, and really feels good. But that's not what it's about, right? It's that stuff that you're saying is hard. Move towards what's hard, and I think that's Peterson was saying: clean your room and take up your cross and do the hard thing. Be a better person. It's hard, but that's what else you're going to do. And it's and with Christ, it's like, when you talk about Christ is the truth, when you say that to someone that's, scientific minded, which I'm scientific minded, but that's really a materialist. Like, what do you mean Christ, the person, is the truth? Yeah. How is he the truth? The truth is, you have a theory, you have a hypothesis, then you do an experiment. And if that experiment matches the hypothesis, you have that's the kind of the theory of truth. And Heidegger critiqued this theory of truth really beautifully, right? Talking about truth as, aletheia, which is Greek, which means the truth being revealed. So he was pointing to this different way of looking at truth that is Christ, in a sense, but he was pointing towards, a lot of people were pointing towards Christ, but the way we understand what truth is, when you tell someone that, Christ is the truth, it's like when you're thinking of experiments and, it's just a totally different way of orienting yourself towards what is true,
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
No.
So how do you explain that to a scientific materialist, that Christ is the truth in their language?
Can't. Yeah, you absolutely can't. And while you were saying that, I was just thinking about if truth is a who, what that does is then put our personhood theology, our order of theology, front and center in regard to our worldview. Obviously, anybody who's listened to Dyer or even myself or Norwegian news rant on about these ideas, most theologies approach God from essence, from abstractness, from the idea of it's this large overarching thing, and it has these qualities. But is it a person? Does it have personhood? A little bit more difficult to put your finger on. And so all these other forms, other theologies, other worldviews do have seeds of logos, but that abstractness almost pixelates the image of God. And so it's not that there isn't something true residing underneath it a little bit, but it's so pixelated by the abstractness that you can't actually see that there's a person behind it. And so Orthodoxy then is a clarifying lens to look at God, because it begins with that personhood. And as soon as you do that, so many things begin to fall into place as a worldview, like how it is that you affect the world, or how so many people are tricked. I've talked about this over and over and over. One of the great things that I read from Alexander Schmemann in his book, Great Lent, last year, was how the Orthodox Christian is called to engage in the world on a one-to-one basis. That if I want to create order in the world, if I want to elevate happiness in the world, I can only do that by finding somebody and doing that to them, with them, for them. That the idea of justice or social justice, these things don't do anything. There's no movement in the world as soon as your goal of a quality, of an energy, to love something, to care for, these are energies that necessitate another person. And so if we're doing these things for ideas, which is the big trick of Satan, it's the big trick of progressivism, it's the big trick of conservatism, it's the big trick of anybody who actually worships an idea, a concept, not a personal God. And so I think Orthodoxy then it provides such a beautiful lens to correct this whole thing and see how, oh, I'm a person. This is how I'm made in the image, because God is also a person. Oh, I pray to God and create a relationship because that's what I do with my father, my brother, my friends, everybody I know. It's a one-to-one, it's a personal relationship because, again, we're made in the image. And so all that stuff makes sense, where I think from a Catholic or Protestant perspective, you're not going to get that emphasis.
Yeah. No, well said. And, first you have to get through that hurdle, looking at through the lens like a scientific materialist, right? But what do you mean we're made? We're not made. There's obviously a blind process of evolution that is happening that has tricked us, religious folk, to thinking that there's meaning when there's no meaning. Everything is random, particles rubbing up against each other and manifesting. And what you're thinking is consciousness, and this is just an emergent property. So, okay, it's an emergent property. Keep going with that. Whoever's at that point, keep pushing on that. What's emerging out of where and why? If it's meaningless, so I think that the whole atheist movement, the four horsemen and that's gone.
Right.
That's gone. We're seeing a weird pagan revival of religion that's happening, right?
Absolutely, because we're in a spiritual war. Really, this is how I see it. And because we're in a spiritual war, people are taking spiritual sides. Atheism is a sort of side, but generally speaking, it only appeals to about 3% of the population. So I think people then are searching for meaning, just like you're talking about with the New Age. What appealed to you and me is the phenomenological dimension. I can take these drugs. I can do these practices, these healing rituals. I feel something. I know something is happening. Therefore, it is true. The metric or the spectrum of good and evil then is kind of messed up. But yeah, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. I have a whole
keep going. No, I love it, and I think that when you talk orthodoxy, what is it? Like the word, you think the word means a right belief, and that's not what it means. Orthodoxy means right worship, right? And this idea is that so beings worship, right? So frogs croak, birds chirp,
right.
crickets chirp, right? Human beings are worshiping creatures, right? If you're not worshiping the highest high, if you're not worshiping the infinite, you're worshiping something. And it might be sex, it might be drugs, it might be status, it might be money, which a lot of time it is. It might be whatever it may be, a philosophy. It might be whatever it is, but they become ideologies, they become idols, they become idolatrous, right? So orthodoxy simply is the right way to worship your creator, right? And if you do that rightly, then it's not a moral stance firstly, right? Morality will cohere under the right worship. So orthodoxy is the right way to orient yourself towards the mystery, towards the infinite, right? Through his son, right? The son is the finite expression of the infinite, is his son. And he's having a son for me, like crystallized like, oh, okay. So this relationship that I have and the care that I have for my son and my daughter and is a smaller dimensional slice of the relationship that we have with our creators, right? With our creator, in a sense, like that infinite love that's unfathomable to us that he has for us, right? We have for our kids, and we can actually have that for everyone. And that's what Christ was kind of trying to teach with unconditional love. And that transforms the world. If you genuinely, open-heartedly love somebody that's in front of you, you transform them. That's might not be not even a felt experience, but that is transformational, right? And that's the Holy Spirit working through people to do that. But it's hard to get out of your own way, man. Your ego to get out of your own way, to be vulnerable enough to love someone, like love the neighbor as yourself. That's not a saying.
Which is, so many people are duped in with the psychedelics that we're all one, right? Oh, we're all one. But again, that negates personhood. This whole thing that we were just highlighting, right? But love your neighbor as yourself, again, reinforces personhood front and center, because your neighbor is a person. Your neighbor isn't one. It isn't oneness. It isn't the concept of unity. It's a person. I just wanted to highlight that again.
It's a unique person, an unrepeatable person, right? And that's the second part of the equation. The first part, the most important part, is love God with all your heart, right? You have to plug into the infinite. You have to plug into Christ in order to be able to share that love with others, right? If you do those two things, right? Then things around you will start cohering, right? And don't take my word for it. Try it, do it, try it. Genuinely try it, in a sense. And it's a profound thing, and it's a beautiful, wonderful thing with all this nihilism and the meaning crisis. It's like there is truth, there is meaning in the world, like inherent in the world, and you can't find it. And if you look for it, knocking knocking he will answer. Right? I have that from Matthew. I have a little beautiful plaque that I have in my office, and it just stood out to me years ago, or a couple of years ago, when I put it there. And it's true. If you look, it will be open to you, right? Because just like if your son goes into addiction or falls away from the family and goes out and starts doing, bad things or whatnot, if he comes back and says, "Dad, I'm sorry. Look, I'm sorry. I love you. Let's fix that relationship." What would you be like as a father? You'd have open arms. You'd be like, right. You would bring him in and would nurture him or your daughter, whatever it may be. That's the same thing. Like, you can come back to being, kind of loved. And I'm trying to look at this conversation that we're having from someone's perspective that's outside of, like, again, a scientific materialist. And I don't know why I do this. What would they think of seeing that? Like, oh, this person's delusional, or this conversation is, religious nuttery. Like, what are you going to, strap a bomb to yourself and be a suicide bomber for this most holy God that you got? What's the difference between this and the suicide bombers that are believe so hardly that their God wants them to die for the 72 virgins? What's the difference between this thing here that we're doing and that extreme? So it's not straightforward, and obviously, exploring these spaces, like, that's why I say find a spiritual father, find those that have been there, someone that you can trust, build a relationship. Don't try to do it on your own. Right.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about, when you say spiritual father, I was thinking of today, a thought I had was, what are the spiritual fathers of the New Age? And in the New Age, as Witkoff and I highlighted in our conversation, just the esotericism, occultism, or the New Age, it always leads back to sex. And so your spiritual father is trying to have sex with your wife, your girlfriend, whoever, it's free love, all this different stuff. What's the relationship to the father, the spiritual father? Well, it's sexual. And I couldn't help but then think immediately I connected with all the degeneracy and the pornography stuff that's pushed on people at a psychological level, with all the incest and the stepdad and the dad and the mom and all this really weird categorization of pornography. It's all the inversion. And even the spirituality in regards to who are your spiritual leaders. Well, I'll go to India and I'll get a yogi, and turns out he slept with everybody as well. It's the same thing. In Orthodoxy, the spiritual father, that is a drastic transgression of boundaries within Orthodoxy. That's not the relationship you have to the masculine principle. It's not all sexual, right? And so our relationship to God the Father isn't some sexual relationship, which you hear the erotic frame so often in the New Age and the esoteric and the Eastern mysticism. It always comes back to some sort of, when you understand the primitive energies, the sexual energies, creating life, you can understand the primacy of these things. But I couldn't help, but I was just thinking about how it's so used for me now to call somebody father. That's a priest. At first, that was kind of uncomfortable. I had never done that as a Protestant, and then as a New Ager or spiritual but not religious. And so now it's very common. And I was just thinking, after I had posted the stream for today, that, geez, the New Age, who are the spiritual fathers? And I just thought about all these sex cults, all these different organizations people get wrapped up in, all these retreat centers, and it always comes down to sex. It always comes down to the person. It's egotistical, right? That they're the center. They're more enlightened than you are, as opposed to trying to align you with Christ, not so much with myself, right? It's still a personal connection, right? It's like the misplaced of, again, the personhood theology, that your relationship is a personal connection with this masculine energy or God or the transcendent or just this thing. And it's almost like, again, the distortion, the manipulation, the inversion is that now that energy gets focused on your yogi. It gets focused on this spiritual healer, as opposed to Orthodox and our spiritual fathers trying to keep us in alignment with Christ, again, in a personal relationship. It's not about the spiritual father. It's about getting back in alignment with Christ.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's funny. It's funny you say that. Jonathan Joe just released, he had a Q&A and somebody asked him, how do you know if a prophet is a true prophet? And he said, because he doesn't make it about himself. He's pointing towards Christ. Like he doesn't make it about him and his energies and his power. It's about, pointing to someone else. It's pointing to Christ.
Right.
And you're exactly right. The spiritual fathers or spiritual mothers or spiritual
Yeah,
energies, I guess, of
exactly.
the new
Whoever.
age. It's not about that. It's about, it becomes, because it becomes idolatry. It becomes about sex, right? It becomes about the person. It becomes about the sexual power of that particular yogi, whether it's Shaktipat or whatever it may be. Now, I don't know that it's the case across the board, and there's probably are some and some actual realized cultivated spiritual beings in the East, right? Whether it's Taoism or whatnot, that were plugged in, maybe to Christ even. I don't know. I don't think it's, but from what we see and what we experience and what's available to us in the West, like it's almost non-existent, that access, to someone like that.
Right.
And I don't even know about that, and like someone that I was attracted to, we talked a lot about Christ. And when I was into, the early 2010s was Ram Dass.
Mm.
Ram Dass spoke, and he had these same issues when it comes down to it in terms of, sexual misconduct or issues or
Yep.
kind of proclivities and whatnot. And the difference really in Orthodoxy,
But
that I
can
think the
we
big difference.
say
Yeah.
say just one thing on that, just so for people listening? Ram Dass, it was previously known as a person named Richard Alpert. He was a
Mm-hmm.
psychologist, PhD at Harvard, along with Timothy Leary and Ralph Metzner. They conducted much of the research, the psychedelic mushroom and LSD research in 1962, 63. They were kicked out of Harvard because Richard Alpert, who became Ram Dass, had a sexual relationship with a young man who was an undergraduate and allowed him to partake in their ritual. Or not the ritual, but it was supposed to be an experiment. They were doing the LSD
Yeah.
stuff, which was forbidden. They said, okay, you can do this stuff. It has to be with graduate students. And so it came out that he was a homosexual. It came out, again, these relationships. And then even he talked about when he went to India. So he goes to India. I forget who his yogi was, Maharashi or something like that. I
Yeah.
forget.
Maharaji. Yeah.
And he comes back as Ram Dass, but while he's there, he even claimed he had a sexual relationship with him and all this different stuff, and that he was bisexual and came back and he promoted a sort of ambiguous sexual orientation afterwards as an enlightened being, as Ram Dass, as this yogi who's reached this enlightened stage. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who didn't know all what you were referring to when you
Yeah.
said that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with regards to that, right? So sex isn't bad, right?
Right.
Sex is procreation, right? And where Orthodoxy, I think, differentiates from all other that I'm aware of, all other kind of spiritual worldviews, is the idea of the passions. And sex is a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your sexual passions are very easily inflamed. And when they are, it's not about being prude. It's about, if you're having promiscuous sex as a man or a woman all the time, what happens? Your relationships struggle. Your relationships with your family, with your friends, they struggle. And I don't know if I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't know if we want to get into it. And that the idea of homosexuality and Christianity, like what's going on there? Like in this Christianity is homosexuality an anathema to Christianity, and I think it's just like any other sin, right? If you're homosexual and you can't help it, whatever it is, right? Like, and the idea is, if you are hypersexual, it's a sin, right? So it's this idea of, if you have these inflamed passions, they could even be good, positive things, but when they're inflamed, right, that's when the demons come in and they inflame your passions. They cause disintegration in your relationships and with yourself. And a lot of the homosexual community, the gay community, gay pride and whatnot, right? Mm-hmm. I have no problem with gay people at all. I have no, I would not judge anybody. I'm a sinner, right? There's no difference between any other sinner for me than myself, right? So there's no judgment at all. But you see that this hypersexuality that is influenced, right? It causes detriment in the lives. Like most of them don't have I don't want to make generalizations, but it's like, if you want to have a full, rich life with nurturing relationships with those around you, and you're a homosexual, right? Or hypersexual or whatever it may be, you have different proclivities. If you work on those, you do the hard thing and don't let those be inflamed, right? That's where asceticism comes in, which is kind of an anathema to our world now. If you do that, that is the goal of, that is the tool of Christianity. Yeah, I don't think you will be shunned if whatever your sin is, if you're genuinely looking to work with the passions, right, to get them under control. Or not you. You can't do it. You have to, you have to be open to Christ, and he'll do it and he'll work with you. But you know what I'm saying? It's not a specific, unique sin. Sin is sin, right? It misses the mark. If you're missing the mark, your relationships disintegrate. It's easy as that, So I've been trying to think of how to talk or think through this idea of, oh yeah, Christianity, but they're totally don't allow, homosexuals into the church and whatnot. And then you see kind of a reaction from the right orientation in Christianity. It was like, yeah, of course we don't, because they're sodomites and whatnot. And I'm like, that's not the right approach. That's not, in my opinion, in my experience from right now, that's not the right approach. Like, these are human beings that are sinners like you and me. Right. And you know what I'm saying? How do we bridge that gap? And it's
no, and it's interesting when you say that. I do not mean to offend anybody by saying this, but again, Christ went where the lepers were, and so homosexuality is a sort of rampant leprosy in our society now. But I think it's so frustrating. So my point in raising that is that Christ, he goes and engages the people that are contrary to his message in person, face to face, and then converts them by being God, obviously. I just lost my train of thought. Where were we going?
Well, so if when Christ came, the Jews were like, all right, our political leaders here, we're going to overthrow the Romans, and we're going to have our, political usurpation, our political reality. So that was what they wanted. But what did he do? Like you were saying, he was with the sinners. He said, I'm not, with the sick. And sick does not mean bad, or, it means people that need healing, right? And he came and healed them, right? The prostitutes, the thieves, people who, because they were sinning, doesn't mean they're like sick and they were missing the mark, right? They were not orienting themselves appropriately, right? So, and it's not a judgment, right? And he was coming to help them. And God, the highest high, was going to the lowest low. He went to hell to help. You know what I'm saying? He went to the lowest, went from the top of the hierarchy to the bottom, and he fills the entire hierarchy. And it's like, oh, so drug addiction is abhorrent in the United States, right? And I have my experience with it, right? That is missing the mark, right? There's so much sin. And this way of thinking of sin, of missing the mark, of not orienting yourself appropriately, that there is a solution, right? And that solution, it's hard to talk about it and talk through it. I don't know if you're familiar with Milo Yiannopoulos.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his new sexual reconversion, if you will. He's coming, identifying now as a straight man, or at least I don't know if he's gone that far, but at least he's. His previous husband has been demoted to a housemate, and I guess they're no longer having intercourse, and that he's now considering becoming a heterosexual man, I guess, in the talks, of which Michael Sisko, I think, will be talking with him here in a few weeks about that.
Yeah, he was on, is it Tom Coffin? I forgot his name.
Is it Catholic?
Yeah.
Is it Patrick Coffin?
Patrick Coffin. I've only seen a few of his, and there's a lot of stuff that I've seen snippets of.
Yeah, I've seen him with E. Michael Jones. That's all I know of him.
Oh, I didn't see that one. But he had a 3-hour conversation with Milo, and my reaction is no reaction. Like, I don't want to say, oh, this guy's a charlatan or he's genuine. I'm not making a reaction to it. I'm just observing the best I can, because it's like, if we say all BS, then what are we talking about when we're saying you can be healed in the church? Like, and then you get into this really hairy territory of conversion therapy and, pray away the gay and stuff that you hear. You know what I'm saying? It's really a wire, it's a tripwire to have a conversation in this space So I'm trying to think or
Hmm.
feel what I feel about it, but I'm not in a place to articulate anything about that. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know,
Yeah. What I was
I
going to
tend to
say
make
earlier,
judgments. Yeah.
and I kind of lost my thread there for a second, was in regards to you were saying about people's disposition and their approach towards homosexuals within the right, the conservative right, Christian right, Orthodox right, or just traditional Orthodoxy. And my point within was hiding that Christ engages with these people in person to person. But what I wanted to add with that is like for me, and I'm sure for many people in the chat, there's another level of anger and frustration. It's not, the fact that somebody is a homosexual doesn't just rile me up. It's the transition of values in society that then, again, we almost scapegoat all that anger and frustration on actual people who are homosexuals, but they are contributing and a part of a ginormous agenda to invert society, to invert sexual order, to inflame society with passions, right? So the sexual degeneracy, the girls twerking, all this stuff, all that sexual promiscuity is wrapped up in the LGBTQ. It's all tied together. And so it's not, I'm certainly not, I got plenty of black friends, plenty of friends of all different races, but does it bother me when I watch TV and I see the deliberate attempt to always show a white woman with a colored man, or a white man in an effeminate place? So it's almost every white man that you see, he's feminized, he's sort of emasculated. He's got his cardigan sweater and his glasses on while his woman is the sort of leader of the house, or he's a homosexual. That's what frustrates me. Then it's like, then I feel like I get into this place, and again, I'm sure I'm speaking for other people, where it's like, how do I defend against this stuff? How do I move society in a different direction? How do we combat it? And it's like, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of hope when the Fortune 500 companies and our government and the globalist infrastructure itself is again behind all this.
Yeah.
And so I think for all of us, we just need to become more conscientious of ourselves. We have to see what triggers our emotions, and sometimes we lash out and put those onto people, and I'm one of those people that will refer to homosexuals as sodomites and stuff like that. So it's like, you're speaking to me as well. I have those same problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to deal with, especially when the more the picture you see. That's how I feel. It's like the more you see it, the more you want to do something in opposition to it. But I think, again, attacking the person isn't going to ultimately do what we think that it's going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those people need, Christ says they know not what they do, right? They need love. They need that healing love. And it's, don't talk about the speck in someone else's eye when you have a board in yours.
Right.
And I'm not saying I can do this. Like when those passions are inflamed in me, like this, I think the saints would say, or well, look what the sin is in you.
Right.
Always look what the sin is in you. Like, I'm no different than the worst of the worst in that group that I see. And then the screens that we look at, that's not reality. We need to stop thinking that that's reality. Twitter is not reality. What we see in these black mirrors in front of us, these TVs, it's
Right.
not reality. It's tricks. It's trickery.
Right.
It's wizardry.
Exactly.
Right. It flames my head all the time. What gets me a lot is commercials about pharmaceutical commercials.
Oh yeah.
Right. And stuff like, lots of stuff that inflames me as well. And I will get upset, and my wife would be like, hey, you're letting it get to you. And I'm like, oh, it's nothing to do with on that TV. It's in me. It's hitting something in me that I'm not able to love the situation or observe it and accept it. It's difficult, but it's always turn it on yourself. I'm a sinner. I cannot judge anybody else. I am a sinner. I sin every day.
Yep.
I can't say that your sin is worse than mine. If I do that, then I'm making you, I'm transferring what's inside of me onto you. Right. And I'm judging you when I should be judging myself,
Right.
Hard to do, almost impossible actually, but they're back to the point, right? Do the hard thing, right? Do the hard thing. And you'll see the fruits of doing the hard thing in your life. And God knows I'm not even close to there. And I'm better at maybe articulating what to do than doing it myself. So I'm a hypocrite as well. I am. I just am. I still have, I vape. I still, I haven't drunk. I drinking my whole life. I did so much drugs back in the day. I still lie. I'm still disingenuous sometimes, right? So I'm no place to judge anybody at all, and my passions get inflamed when I see it on the screen mostly. But when I turn around, I turn the screen off. I look around me. That's not the case. I don't see inverted and horrible satanic homosexuals all over the place. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I guess maybe if we were in different places of the world, but that's not what's happening in my immediate environment. I turn the TV off and I go back to, my wife or my neighbors or my family and have a conversation, have some coffee, or play with my kids. But it's like you literally get plugged back into the matrix, and it's like a passion inflaming machine is the screens. It's like, it's the knowledge of good and evil, right? And at its highest intensity. And we are not spiritually mature enough to handle the knowledge of good and evil. You know what I'm saying? So It's like we get snagged all the time. And I think the only thing I can do is if I place a judgment on someone for whatever it is, and it's easy to do, and I do, especially with like little Nas and the satanic shoes. This just seemed like a weird, empty, like a charade more than like a real satanic kind of worship type thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's not even real. That person doesn't believe that. This is a marketing BS thing. It's not even something, you know what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. And I think also from our perspective as Orthodox Christians, it is evil. It is satanic ultimately. So even though he may or may not believe in the theology behind his performance art, the effect it has on society, the fact that the majority of his audience are children below the age of 16, the whole sexual degeneracy, the transformation of sexual roles. It's like, how do you put these things into categories when they do affect people?
Yeah.
It's like, it is ultimately satanic. And at the same time, we can recognize that we have to pray for Lil Nas because he is also a person that is inflamed with passions, caught up in greed, all these temptations that probably many of us, maybe not the homosexual thing, but we would fall victim to ourselves if we were dangled those carrots in front of us. And so as Orthodoxy says, the more you do that, the more you darken your news, the more you're not going to be able to see what's in front of you anyways. And so if we are, hopefully, cleansing our news or undarkening, enlightening it any way that we can, we just have to pray for these people. But every day it becomes more apparent that it is satanic. The whole thing is satanic. The whole thing is an inversion, and that Lil Nas satanic shoe is just one little instance of the whole thing just presenting itself. I mean, the transgender children stuff, the passports that are coming. It's again, and it builds up anxiety in people, which then they lash out against the sodomites or whoever. Because how long have we been telling you the vaccine passports were coming? Now they're here.
Yeah.
It's a reality.
Yeah. And it's not going to get better.
Right.
Like, it's not going to get better. And from, these boxes that we watch, these rectangles that we have at various sizes, the phone, the screen, the TV, right? Looking through there, it's not going to get better. And that's not the real world. Like, it's just not, I don't, when we say we have to pray for Little Nas, I agree. Am I at a place where I can really do that? No.
Right.
Like,
can I authentically feel the way I should feel towards him? No.
I'm going to fake it till I make it. I'm going to fake it till, like, Christ, the people that were hanging him up on a cross and killing him and spitting on him, he said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now, when people say, oh, that's Jesus, would have going to be Christ? Well, you're supposed to follow his teachings. You're supposed to follow his life, right? And you're going to fail almost every time. What does that mean? You give up? Like, that's the devil playing a trick on you. Oh, look, it's the worst of the worst. In the worst scenario, Christ said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I think for our sake, it's forgive them for theirs. If you can really forgive them, it changes you. That's what metanoia is, really forgiving the thing that inflames you the most, which I pray every day that I can do that. And I fall short every day,
Yeah.
but every day. But, and I'm going to fall short even more. And, but whatever, what else can you do? What are you going to give up? But again, the one piece of solace is that when you turn the TV off, when you turn the Twitter off, when you turn social media off, and you look at your surroundings, yeah, you don't see it like it is as, on the TV. I don't know. You live in Indiana, right?
Yeah.
Like the neighborhoods that you live in, when you go to your grocery store, when you go to the gas station, you're not seeing it generally most of the country and probably most of the world, but where it is happening, those in power, and they are satanic, right? They have the channels of communication to the rest of the world. They have the switches, right? Mm-hmm. And they're going to take the worst of the worst, the most degenerative, disorienting, disintegrating things about the world. They're going to pipe them into onto our households, and they're going to come into our consciousness, and they're going to inflame our passions. And that happens to me every single day. And I get snagged on it every single day. But one piece of solace is that is not, and it can be, and it is metastasizing. Like we saw what happened I'm getting snagged into it again. Like, like it's metastasizing from the colleges where you saw the insanity at Evergreen.
Absolutely.
Right.
Is.
It's now into government, into like, but is it like, see, like
I think
that's why.
Well,
I do.
Because
I mean, I do.
We live in a dualistic world. So it's fallen. It has to exist. If good exists, the evil exists, and it's got to also be there. So,
and St. Passio said, he never said that anybody hated him. He said, he just loves me. He doesn't love me as much. Like, and he even said, like, they would ask him, what about the devil? Do you hate him? He says, no, he's just a trickster. He called him like, the devil. He called him like a trickster. Like, again, it's this idea of, and not to take it in a kind of different tangent. I don't know if like in my dream space, especially recently, the more I try to not sin, the more I get attacked in my dreams by demons, right? And they come in different shapes and sizes. And I've had many, many dreamscapes where these empty beings, sometimes they literally have straw in them, and they look like soldiers, right? And they come and will put you in the most fearful kind of place, but they're not real, right? They can't really affect you. And I was talking with an Orthodox priest. He's African-American, just an amazing human being. I was blessed to be able to talk with him. And he's like, James, Orthodox teaches you not to flinch, right? Not to flinch in the face of the demons. And I'm like, whoa, okay. I'm flinching a lot. But imagine getting to that place where you don't flinch. It's like, okay, you see evil, you see Satan, and you see it with the kids, especially with the Cardi B stuff and how it's geared toward kids. Same thing with Lil Nas. My son and my nephews loved his song, Old Town Road. It's one of their favorite songs. We would sing it. So now you're gearing this to them. You know what? It's like, it's hard. You get back into it. And it's like that can't be reality. And we just have to be sovereign and mindful in our immediate environments and the company that we hold, to show the truth as we know it, to let Christ work through us the best we can. And we're going to fail a lot. Like, I try to think of a solution there, and there's no solution to what you see coming through the screen. There's no solution to that. The solution is local, immediate, embodied.
Right.
So I
totally agree. And I have a few things I want to say in response to that. When you were talking about seeing the propaganda through the black mirror, and then going out into the real world and not being bombarded with the same thing that it's presenting to you as reality, I agree. But also, to the flip side of that, look at the masks. And so I go out. I have been a very anti-mask person from the beginning. I've absolutely refused to wear a mask almost anywhere I go in the state. We're not like Florida. We didn't have such a governor who gave a little bit more liberty. So I guess it's like the conceptual, the logical jump from seeing how easily people are manipulated by the faux presence of authority, the CDC, the World Health Organization, the White House. We have to wear a mask, even though this obviously makes no rational sense. It's contradictory. You take it off when you go to the restaurant. I mean, all these internal contradictions that show you this is total absurdity. Yet, I mean, you go into Walmart now a year later, and it's like you're still seeing people in masks wearing a surgical mask, wearing a cloth over their face for a virus that has a 0.03 mortality rate. And it leaves you scratching your head. It again makes you frustrated. And that is like something that you are seeing locally, right? So it doesn't matter where you're at. You could be in Wyoming. You could be, I'm in Indiana. You're in Florida. And so it's like that's the other flip side to it. It's like the intensity of the homosexuality, the transgender, the child transgenderism. We don't, it's not right in front of us. Although the transgender story time at the libraries, that came here, that was real local here in Indiana. And I know some people got upset about it. I haven't heard of it since, but I think that was right before the pandemic in like the end of 2019. Is we had transgender story hour right here in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that stuff has real world consequences. And I think then the extremities of the propaganda, seeing how effective something that's not as extreme, meaning wear your mask and everybody's doing it, so the social cues, they go along with it. Yeah, I think those are two flip sides of the same thing. When you're talking, another thing that popped in my head is you're talking about the difficulty of falling short as an Orthodox Christian every single day. And I couldn't help but relate that back to our earlier topic on questioning the path we're on and how that relates to previous paths we've been on. And so Orthodoxy is so difficult of a spiritual challenge from the start that you can't do it. That's again why God had to become man to make that bridge. And so we're called then to get up over and over and over and over again. And through my own life, those things that are difficult, like working out, like reading books and building a body of knowledge, that takes a lot of time, and that is very difficult. And so for me, having done all the psychedelic stuff, but having done all those things to become competent or successful, you encounter orthodoxy and you're like, oh, wow, this challenge is obviously beyond any sort of new age progressive challenge where it says you can basically do whatever you want and the fulfillment of your highest desires because you're the universe. That's not really challenging. And that's why it's also so appealing, because it lures you with little bits of truth. But orthodoxy is so difficult that nobody would choose this unless they had to believe it to be true. It's like, why? Why would I do this? And that makes me want to continue doing it, because everything that I've done in my life that is good, true, and beautiful is difficult, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort to keep going. And so that is one reason, maybe related to why I think I am on the right path with orthodoxy compared to other spiritual paths that I've been on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably harder now because of all the stuff that we were just talking about that's prolific, and, bringing McLuhan a little bit, how media is an extension of man, and media and this ubiquitous constant imagery that we see of degeneracy, of sin, literally at all levels, constantly piped in. It probably was easier to be ascetic, to be more, to follow the right path, right? But between the left and the right, without falling for the sins of the left hand and the sins of the right hand, was probably a lot easier without this being piped into you, right? And then, especially with this idea of being a progressive and liberalism, right? You should be compassionate and kind, which you should, right? But it's hard to see when that goes too far. It's hard to see when that goes too far, and it's going too far at a hyper level all around us, right? So it's even harder to pull back from that, right? Because you have so much going against you, all of society going against you, to pull back from that and just follow a middle path. It's almost, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And I don't know how we can articulate it's the right thing to do. If you're not inside of the Orthodox or aware of it, to hear someone say that's the right thing to do, it's like, oh, well, you're just another religious. Why wouldn't Protestantism or Catholicism or whatever? And I'm not saying they're not right or wrong, but like if you go to a Protestant church, you don't have to. You're not expected to sacrifice and to fast before you take communion and to be a catechumen and learn. Right? You're just giving it to you because because of this compassion, this kindness that is good. But when it goes too far, it goes too far and you're not aware of it. And it's gone way too far.
Right.
And I think that's why people are looking to something, are more attracted to something that's difficult and true, right? Where the pendulum has swung so far to the left, right? Like Peterson would say, well, it's easy to see when the right goes far, white supremacy, Nazism, right? Oh, it's easy to see that. But it's hard to discern when the left goes real far because we are inculcated in the culture of liberalism, right? So people will have to look at themselves and say, oh, this thing's going too far. And that's hard to do, right? But it's gone way too far. And then plus add the electronic media, add social media, and these light emitting diodes that are constantly, McLuhan said that, when a child's in front of a television, he's being x-rayed. Like there's literally light coming into us. It's not being reflected. Right. It's emitting into us. That adds a whole nother kind of dimension. Yeah. So all of this sin of the world that's all over is being
embodied in the receiver.
Yes. It's
becoming personalized in the individual.
Yes. And that's probably why it's so easy to get snagged. Like when you're talking about masks, I had this 3 days ago, all of a sudden I got really upset about my son still wearing a mask at school. And I'm like, it's been a year, right? And I'm going to go in there and I've asked the person, hey, how long, when I drop them off, how long are they going to have to wear a mask? Oh, we don't know. So I'm like, who do I go to? The principal? I'm like, no, I've actually asked kind of higher levels and they say, oh, they were following CDC guidelines, we're following Department of Health, right? I'm like, so who do you go to that's going to say, oh, we're doing this for 6 more months? Everybody says, oh, we're deferring to some agency, right? I'm like, my son is resilient, but kids, they're being affected, right? And it's like, how long are we going to allow that to happen, right? And how long is nobody going to say anything? And if I go in there and say something, you have to be calm when you say it. You're going to be, oh, are you a Q person? Are you a Trump?
Right.
An old Trump supporter? Are you a right wing? No, I am not. So it's how do you thread that needle? Because if you get mad and you get inflamed, that's the wrong way. But if you do nothing, it's the wrong way as well. And I was just like, I was seething, and I'm like, there's no evidence that kids are transmitters of it. And you've had masks on them for a year,
right? And
God bless these kids. They like it's an issue for dad, but my son's like, whatever. It's just it recedes in the background, like media technologies do.
But that's the problem is that the mask now is part of the behavior. That's way bigger than whether. Well, it's not necessarily whether they have problems breathing or not. Look at stuff, but the fact that it's now so normalized, that is the Great Reset. This is initiation process. And it's so sad is that the children are going to be initiated before you are, right? Yeah. You see it, but because of their familiarity with them wearing it, and then the teachings at the school, they're being initiated into the transition of the Great Reset.
What's wrong with the Great Reset? Right. Hey, you're going to have, you're going to have, everything's going to be free, transportation, all these technologies are just going to give us such an easier life. Like, that sounds great to me. I won't have to work hard. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, that sounds so great. And the people that are implementing these things, I think they're really think that they're saving the world and they're doing something good.
Right. I think they do. That is the inversion, right? Because they worship the father of lies ultimately due to their sin, whether they profess that or believe that or however. And so that inversion of their morality, again, always in the name of abstractness, always in the name of a general concept, never for individual people, never specific and personalized, that they think that they're going to change the world because, again, of the theology, they're illumined. They're the enlightened ones. They're the ones that are going to usher us into the future because we're so backward. We probably still believe in God.
Mm-hmm. That's the main issue is they don't know what they're worshiping. Like Bill Gates is worshiping. Like humans, their main function is to worship.
Right.
David Foster Wallace, who's an atheist, he wrote this beautiful piece on water. He talked about it at a commencement speech, and he talked about as an atheist, he's like, you don't think you worship. So just be mindful. If you think you're not worshiping something, you're caught into something. There's no way to get out of it, right? You're going to invest your energies, your creative energies into something, right? And if you're an atheist, it's into something else. It's into atheism, right? You're investing your creative energies into something. And, these people that are well-meaning or not, that are at this highest level trying to, fix and rework society to be completely organized, it's disastrous. Like, I try to pull back and be like, all right, well, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe, it will work out. Like, maybe, this is just an overreaction by me or the circles that I run in. And when I would really try to think about it without being inflamed, I'm like, whoa, no, I don't see any way where that is going to work. So it's like,
Right.
again, when we zoom out in the macro level, it looks hopeless.
Right.
But if you zoom in the micro level, you have agency, and you
Exactly.
can
Yes. So
work locally.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why, again, Witkoff and I were talking about how, even though despite the world falling apart, it seems like our lives aren't, they're actually getting better. I've made a lot of strides forward towards my goals in the last year and a half. So it is this weird place that we reside in regards to witnessing the collapse of everything around us. And again, the Great Reset, it's not like it would be a very ignorant point of view to feel like I'm defending the previous system.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm doing is highlighting a larger agenda of which they can't ultimately implement. It's not like I'm afraid of the Great Reset. I'm not afraid of it. It's the fact that just read Agenda 2021. What was Event 201? It's like they're telling you about it. That's how everybody knew what was going to happen. So the Great Reset is an opportunity as well. How it's going to go, I'm more of you. I think it's a little bit more pessimistic. I think things are going to get a lot worse. I think obviously the people that might be at odds with ourselves occupy a lot of power in society. But the whole thing, the reason why you should never be afraid of evil or people with these mastermind centralized plans of power is they're not in control. God is in control, and everything they create, give it the internet, give it whatever was a form of manipulation control, also is used in the opposite. We're having this conversation. We're able, how many people have discovered orthodoxy through online research, through YouTube videos, through apologetics. And so we're using the serpent, we're using the technology, we're using the things to control us, also to liberate us. So the Great Reset is an opportunity, but it's so difficult to reside in the place where you can talk about it, you can point at it, you're saying, hey, this is happening right here, look at it, it's going on, we can see it. But at the same time, you don't get inflamed, you don't get angry. And I have yet to find that happy medium, because right now it's like I just can't do the TV stuff. I just have to have it out of my life. I can't engage with so much because I can't pull those reins back. It's like, especially when with just some of the stuff going on with our current administration or the vaccine passport. So I share a lot of memes on my own Instagram just to keep it light, right? I gotta get off that stuff. I gotta focus on something a little bit lighter and fun. So it is, as you're highlighting, such a difficult point to occupy, because we're called as Christians. And this was something that I wanted to say that I didn't in the Witkoff interview, is esotericism, occultism, every form of spirituality really outside of Christianity has secret truths. But we're called by God to speak exoteric truth, right? There are no secrets. We're supposed to speak truth to the world. And right now, for me, speaking truth to the world is often tied with a frustration with the world that I fall victim to myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the Bible, right? That Revelation, right? What Christ said, look, what's going to happen. It's going to, I can't quote the scripture of what in Revelation. It's so rich and symbolic, and all of what's in the Bible is echoing through time, right, in our lives. And do we really trust God? Like, we don't. We fail all the time. Then we wouldn't never get frustrated. We'd be in the world and not of it, right? You could see the debauchery and degeneracy, and you wouldn't react, right? Imagine not reacting at all, and actually, loving what's happening, right? Not loving it like in support, but it's almost impossible to do.
Yeah.
But the teachings are there. Be in the world and not of it.
Right.
Don't look at the speck in your brother's eye when you have the log in your eye.
It,
If we can always turn it back to ourselves,
right. And that has been the hardest one for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Is the mask thing, like the log in my eye and the log in other person. Now, clearly that one, oh, well, I'm not wearing a mask. They're wearing a mask, so it doesn't look like I have the log in my eye. But the way that I feel towards those people is absolutely not Christian. When they come up to me or say something to me, or they want to challenge me, or I go somewhere like a gas station and I'm surrounded by 10 other people. And it's like, guys, take your mask off. And the thing for me, like with other men, it's like these are grown men. I'm not there. It's like, how do people, what I don't understand is like people, when I go out, they see that people service me. I don't wear a mask. I'm not engaging in all that stuff. And I never see people take the mask off. And so I feel myself, I get angry. Or when I was Orthodox in this stuff, or am Orthodox, but when I was still a catechumen, in the church and this stuff was happening, and we sing the cherubic hymn, lay our earthly cares aside. And people are literally pulling the mask off their face to sing it. Mm-hmm. And then you say, well, these people don't have faith. These people don't really believe in God. And then, so what am I doing now? I'm making a judgment on people's relationships with God. Mm-hmm. So you see, then I fall right back into the problem. I fall right back into the person I really don't want to be, and in the pursuit of trying to pursue Christ and tell truth and speak to the world. So it's like you always run into the irony.
Yeah, it's a fallen world, right?
Right.
Anything that we see through the screen or outside of, it's a fallen world. So we got to be mad at the world because it's fallen. Like it just is. It is what it is. We know why. We know what we can do personally to overcome that in ourselves. But we're constantly brought back and triggered and roped back into the fallen world, even though we know I guess intellectually that it's fallen, right? It's missing the mark,
right?
Continuously missing the mark. How can we get mad at the world missing the mark when it's a fallen world? Like, how can we get mad at it? Like, and then I think Gerard has a brilliant insight of the kind of the way the desire works. Desire is mimetic. Like, we don't desire things in this fallen world or in this world because of the inherent qualities of the things themselves. We desire things because of the desire of the other. And that's how this crowd mentality works, right? And that's what the story of Christ when they were going to stone the Samaritan woman, right? And it says, he is without sin cast the first stone. And he wouldn't look at them in the eyes. He wouldn't look at the crowd in the eyes, because if you look at the crowd in the eyes, like, you get pulled in. That is the devil. Satan is diabolical, right? Mm-hmm. Christ is symbolic, right? Sin means to bring together. Symbolic. Diabolic is literally the inverse of it. Diabolic is to tear apart. Well, one is to throw together or to tear apart.
The Spanish word for the devil is diabolos.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Diablo, 100%. So it's like, there's, and it's this idea of, you have to walk that path. Like, when I'm out not wearing a mask or whatnot, we can't judge the others. And I'm talking to myself here. Right. And just be normal with it. Like, you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. I'm choosing not to. I'm choosing to make my own decision as a sovereign human being. And I respect myself and I respect you. But it's hard to do, man. It's hard to do. I keep running back to that. It's easy to say and whatnot, but it's hard to really, but if you do it, it has the fruits of it. That's how you, again, going back to how you can tell the roots by the fruits. You can tell whether you're spiritually rooted or rooted appropriately by the fruits of your relationships, and they'll never be perfect. And you're always going to get snagged, but just like we're doing here, like right when if you can get snagged and become aware of it and then bring yourself back to just observe, right? Be in the world, but not of it.
Right.
Like, I think that is the highest, that's the highest understanding of this whole world of the witness, that, from New Age religion or Eastern mysticism, become the witness, become the observer, right? That's a real spiritual truth. And the highest quality of that spiritual truth is be in the world, but not of it.
Right.
Right. Be in the world, but not of it. That's what McLuhan talked about when he observed a media landscape, when he was trying to probe a certain media, whether it's television or radio or whatever it is, he comes at it with no theory. He comes, he attempts to look at it and observe it. And people would ask him, is TV good or bad? He was a Catholic, devout person, and he saw what was happening. He didn't say, "Oh, TV is terrible." He didn't say that at all. He says he was in the world, but not of it. He was just observing.
Well, yeah, he would say he doesn't make value judgments in his scholarship, for sure. And he said he couldn't say what the long-term effects of these things were. I mean, he obviously had theories.
Because saying what the long-term effects is wielding the knowledge of good and evil, which we cannot do. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like for him to, and you know what I'm saying? For him to do that, or this is my interpretation of it for me to say that this is going to turn out X, Y, and Z is applying the spiritually immature knowledge that everybody else kind of has, and until we obtain that spiritual maturity that we were supposed to get, if we would have, progressed in the Garden of Eden and eaten from the tree of the knowledge of the tree of life, right? I think the whole idea is to get society there. Like we can have intergalactic relations, and we can have a society that is functioning really well and highly if we would follow the 10 commandments, right? If we follow these base code and these base rules, right, then which we fall horribly all the time, then our society would cohere and work appropriately, and then we could do amazing scientific even things that are wonderful and beautiful. Like Christ said, "All of the things I do, you will do, but more." Right? And I had this weird idea of and this is just pure weird speculation, like different planets right across the universe with different civilizations at different levels of development, right? And then when a certain species is done, like they're still eating each other, right? Cannibalism was ubiquitous in over the globe, right? In almost every religion, people were eating kids and they were eating each other, right? And Christ came and said, "Stop it, eat from my blood and from my, from my body, right? Stop eating each other." Gerard goes deeply into the history of cannibalism in different religions, right? Mm-hmm. And think about all these different planets. You have civilizations that are different levels of development, and a certain civilization gets to, where they're developed enough, or they're leveraging language, they're categorizing things. Then you plant the Christ seed, and it's like, okay, if you can just up level, like follow these rules, right? Stop eating each other and become people, become persons. The kingdom of heaven is yours. The kingdom of heaven, who knows what that is in this terms of context, but the kingdom of heaven is a place to be and exist and have relations with. This is pure speculation. I'm just kind of putting it out there. You know what I'm saying? The Christ seed is planted, right? And it's a mustard seed, and it grows, and it takes time, right? And as it grows, the old structures fall apart. And when those structures fall apart, it looks really, really bad. It looks like Revelation, but what's on the other end of Revelation? Right. The kingdom of heaven. Right? Do you really believe that? I'm talking to myself now. Do you really believe that there's, because you see the destruction now and the disintegration. Do you really believe on the other end of that is the kingdom of this return of Christ? And who knows what that is and what that means or what that will look like. I fake it till I make it. I do believe that. I do believe that. I do believe the kingdom of heaven is at hand, but it's going to get worse. Like things will appear to disintegrate further. I don't see it any other way, right. But not really, not in the kingdom of heaven. Right.
But we're not sure that we're in the end times. So although we can agree that things may get worse, that doesn't mean things may not get better because we're not in the end times yet. And I think for some people, there's a big presupposition among some who talk about that we're already in the end times. But as Orthodox, it's the church that will tell us when we're there. So we shouldn't necessarily assume that, as I'm sure some people. Not saying you do. I'm just saying some people. That's always the sort of framework that they're talking about all this stuff.
What do you think that means that the church will tell us? Like, is it the political structure of the church? Is it certain priests? Is it like, what does that mean, you think?
The way it's been described to me is that when they say the church, it is all of it. That you're going to hear voices from the hierarchy, from priests, from laity, that the body of Christ will be proclaiming that we are in the end times. So obviously some people already feel like that's happening because of some prophecies that have been spoken of by various saints. Maybe we are. I mean, certainly it's got the trappings. I'm not denying that whatsoever. But yeah. I'm I'm a critical optimist. I'm very critical of everything, but deep down, I'm optimistic of my life. I'm optimistic of my future. I'm optimistic of building a family and having a great. So I'm in for me to not have the excitement to wake up and do the things that I do and read the books and make the streams, life would be terrible. And so it's like all I have right now is trying to connect with God, trying to go partake in the body and blood, and just trying to be as hopeful and as consistent and persistent to building the future that I want. And that gives me purpose, and that gives me drive, and to make progress in that only perpetuates that feedback loop. And so for me, I feel like that's the only thing that keeps me sane. Because if I wasn't working, for me, I can't imagine being in with what's going on right now and just consuming the media, consuming television. I've heard so many, I know of some people that haven't worked in 6 months that are playing video games. They're living a pretty nice, lazy life right now. And so they're not in a hurry to get back to work. For me, I have to work all the day. I have to go to the gym. I have to come back. It's the only way I can be sane. And it feels like, and it fulfills me, and it gives me more excitement. It gives me more hope. And so without that, I feel like I wouldn't have a whole lot, because the criticism of looking at the world, there's so much to be critical of, and there's so much to get you down.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of came is you have a foothold in the kingdom, right? Is this what you're doing, what you love? What is your passion? And you're talking about Orthodox theology and deep Orthodox ideas, and people are attracted to it. Like, what? People are following you for it? It's like, that's a wonderful thing. Like, right. That is a beautiful, wonderful thing. So we have a foothold in the kingdom, right? Yes. And we're going to continuously be pulled in back into it. It is what it is. It's we can't take it so seriously, and it's hard to do. But I'm with you. Like, my relationships, with my wife and my family, things are getting better. My job, things are locally getting better, and I'm trying to share that with everyone that I can, right? But what better time to be kind of alive? Like, there are interesting times, like before it was. And that's why I think the end times, I don't know. This is kind of my understanding of the end times. It's not a temporal thing. Well, it is, but it's not just a temporal thing. It's a pattern of being that is reverberating. Like, we've always been in the end times. Christ was here for the first 1,000 years, right? The end time is not just the end is coming temporally now. I think it's a mixture, or like a resonance of the end times that's happening, because the old structures are falling. Right. We are in between space.
Yes.
If it's not the end times of the world as it's ever, it's not the end times of the world as such.
That is such a great way to say it. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know though. Like, I don't know. That's just right now how it's coming to me. But see,
either way, for everybody, life has changed. Yeah. There's been a drastic schism. Whatever your life was before COVID, it's gone. There's going to be things that have remained. There's obviously some similarities. So I think that is a great way to frame it. There's been a minor end times for everybody.
Yeah.
And so now it's time to move forward towards the kingdom.
Yeah. It's coming. I think it's crazy to hear myself say that. Like, but you see, try to just observe what's happening and don't make judgments. Right. And then, it dawns on you what's happening, and it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. Like, with my kids, and I see their consciousness, and the way that, especially my 6-year-old comes and prays with me. He's the one who's leading the prayer every night. Make sure he knows the St. Patrick prayer by heart. He knew it before I did. I rise this morning through God's strength to pilot me, God's wisdom to guide me. The whole, it's long,
Christ
right?
Before me, Christ beside me.
Yeah. This party goes against inclinations of nature, against anyone who shall wish me ill, afar and near, alone and in a crowd. And he repeats that every morning. 6 years old,
wow.
Right? And I see this light turn on in my youngest 1-year-old and my daughter and other kids. Like, you can see it in the kids. And I don't think we're in a place where we're going to just smash that out of them like we have been doing to kids. Like, just taking that. Like, is it possible to raise kids and not them have to go through this fall? I think this idea that kids, this innocence that kids have, right? It's lost when you come of age and you become a teenager and you rebel from your parents and whatever it is, right? That is a mini fall. I think kids were spiritually innocent and pure like Adam and Eve were. Not exactly, right? This in awe with the world, right? They don't have the knowledge of good and evil yet. They don't know if someone has bad intentions. Like, you know what I'm saying? They can't
Right.
feel that yet.
Right.
But then you get inaugurated into the fallen world when you become a teenager, right? And it's traumatizing. It's traumatizing.
Right.
Are we moving into a world where that's not going to happen to our kids now? And can we steward and guide them, and not just biological kids, like kids in general? Can we guide them and steward them into a world where they're not going to have this break, this fall? Like, I don't know, that might be too optimistic. But to see the light of consciousness in my kids and in kids in general, that gives me hope as well. That gives me a lot of hope. But again, I just almost went to it. But look what's happening with Cardi B and everything on the thing. You know what? I want to bring this up quickly. I asked the Father Seraphim Aldea, who was an Orthodox monk, Mall Monastery. I suggest checking him out. And then before we had our pre-conversation, before we had our podcast episode, I asked him, what we wanted to talk about, and I asked him about children. He's like, James, I don't have any children. So I'll if you ask me a question, I'll speak to it as best I can. And I started asking him, I'm like, what this technology and everything that we see what's having and the, that's just inundated us and our children, what do we do? How do we guide them? And he said to me, trust them. And I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that. And then that's dropped the seed in me, like, trust them, and then Christ says, follow the babes,
Right.
and Christ is the kingdom of heaven is like children, so they are teachers, like they are. And then how do we trust them? Like, I think that's what we should do, but I don't know what that means, or how do we do that?
Right.
How do you trust the spark that you see in them? You trust the
right.
innocence?
No, I was thinking about this recently. Actually, I'm going to be making a video for the website for members on curiosity and the question why, reflecting on this is exact thing. Mark 10:13 through 16, talking about how we have to be childlike to enter the kingdom of God. Children are closest to Christ, right? And the children, how they always ask why. And curiosity itself, genuine curiosity. I mean, this is the whole premise of my rabbit hole podcast, of how rabbit holes bring you back to Christ. You're just the adult in the fallen world still having the childish curiosity to ask why, which brings you back to God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the children are closest to God. And so I was thinking about that. And I'm going to speak more to that topic specifically for members. But I couldn't help but kind of think that goes together. So then when you talk about the school and you're going in there, you're trying to get answers. Why are you doing this? When is it going to stop? And what do? They're not curious about the whys and the whens and the what. So it's just ascending back to authority, institutional authority. And so it's like the adults lose the childlike wonder. They stop asking why, and therefore they become one with the fallen world, instead of trying to reject it. And the only way you can reject it is to continue ask why, which is going to bring you back to Christ.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Well said. And I think it goes with this crowd phenomenon, right? The power of the crowd, which is the power of Satan. The power of the crowd is so powerful that, administrators, teachers, principals, superintendents, governors, right? They all follow the crowd. That's like whatever it is that the authority says, right? It's so powerful that sovereignty is lost. And I love the idea of this curiosity of something that popped up is kids asking why is God having Adam name the animals, right? That's always intrigued me, right? So to name the animals, you have to be curious about them, right? And to name them is not naming them willy-nilly, but when you're being curious, you're not curious and just grasping at straws. You're following something. That curiosity is following something. And I love that idea of following the rabbit hole to Christ. All rabbit holes, all conspiracy theories, ultimately, to transcend all conspiracy theories is to find the transcendent one,
right?
To find Christ. And I know you have, and I've gone through some rabbit holes.
That's the big conspiracy, man. Right? So you go down these conspiracy rabbit holes, but the conspiracy theory, all conspiracies are just to keep you from God. Mm-hmm. So the ultimate conspiracy theory is, again, going down these rabbit holes to realize that as actually the case. Yeah. And that Christ is king. And that the whole thing was to separate me from that realization. That's the conspiracy, whether people are conspiring in that conspiracy consciously or not.
Yeah. Those they know not what they do.
Yep.
Right. They know not what they do. So Satan is the ultimate conspiracy theorist. Right?
Yeah. And last thing I wanted to say, and then you can say whatever you want to say. We could take some super chats. It's already been 2 hours. I don't mean to keep you too long. I know you just finished the day at work. But when you're talking about the children and society and all this stuff, and the gentleman who said to trust them, I hope, again, this is my putting on some optimistic lenses to look at things, is that maybe as society becomes more retrograde and more degenerate and more despicable, that the children being closest to God, right, deep down in their innocence, that when they encounter truth and Christ and tradition and orthodoxy, or just people trying to do what's right, that it will resonate at a different level because of what it's contrasted to, right? That as society becomes more degenerate, purity and righteousness and truth and objectivity is going to become more and more apparent. Mm-hmm. And maybe, just maybe, they will choose that path. Hopefully, if they have good parents.
Yeah, if they have good parents. And again, I mean, that give us another rabbit hole of
yeah, fair enough.
Of God the Father is gone and fathers are gone, right? Right. As above, so below. Right. The fathers are gone, divorced, right? Especially in the like Black and brown communities, and even just hard oppressed communities, the father's been kicked out. And people criticize Jordan Peterson and his followers, or people that resonate. Oh, these are just people that missed their daddy or didn't have a good father. Yeah. What is that, a critique? Like, are you know what I'm saying? Oh, these are people just looking for a father figure. Yeah. Well, that's not a critique, man. That's what you're doing, not you. You, the person that's seeing that in someone else, has that in them, Well, but anyway, yeah.
And it can be true, but it's not addressing the problem, right? It's like to criticize Peterson as his fans just have daddy problems, doesn't address the fact that we have a society of people with daddy problems.
Yeah.
So he's still fulfilling a role that's necessitated by the fact of our degenerate and depraved society.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, fathers were, families are messy, man. Families are messy. With the 20th century, the authoritarian father that goes too far, beats their kids, is shitty to his wife. There's lots of that. So it's not a simple answer. Right. The critiques of the way that families have been, a lot of times they're valid, and it's difficult, right? Because they're sick. Like, we need the healing, man. We need, like, that's why the marriage in the Orthodox Christianity, right? When you get married, you literally become another being. You take one flesh.
Right.
And this idea just came to me this morning. I guess I kind of finished on this is, so divorce is suicide, right? Mm-hmm. Divorce is suicide because you literally become something more. Two people come together and you become one flesh under God, right? So you are a new thing, right? It's just like when you commit suicide, your atoms don't commit suicide. They go their separate ways, right? When a man and a wife take a divorce, they don't die. But the being that was alive, right, under Christ, if you believe this thing that the church tells you, that's disintegrated, right? It's like a suicide, right? And divorce rates being at 60, 70%, you're seeing mass disintegration. But again, with hope that disintegration leads to reintegration into resurrection.
Easy, Ken.
Come on. Transcend and include, man. Transcend and include. But man.
Well, that was great. Great, brother. Before we hop into some of the super chats, again, can you tell the people where they can find you? Your YouTube link is there in the video description. So guys, click the link, click the description, comes down. It says James's YouTube channel. Click that link and go subscribe.
Yeah. No, thank you. You can, my channel is just my name, James Kourtides, Kourtides, or I think if you put in the Rooster's Crow, which is the podcast, you'll find me there. And, I appreciate you.
Also known as the Cock Crow. So
the Cock Crow. Yeah, come listen to the Cock Crow. Come listen to the Cock Crow.
Well, thank you so much, brother. The first one is by Brandon Dybert, otherwise known as B-Dibe. Actually, the musical artist, the musician who created the song that we used to open today's stream. He super chatted $5 and said, "Is James's background by Owen Cyclops? His comics are awesome." So
Yes.
can you speak to that for a second?
Yeah. Yeah. Good eye here. He just, I collaborated with Owen, wonderful human being, man. He worked with me for 2 months. He did obviously all the artwork, and that is the idea of the Rooster's Crow and Peter's denial of Christ through the eye of Owen Cyclops. So definitely follow him.
Yes.
Good eye there.
Yeah, absolutely. We also Pano. I know you know Pano. He threw in $6 and said, "In the ancient Greek and Roman world, silent reading was considered awkward. People were taught to enunciate, read out loud everything. When I was in university, reading aloud my textbooks made the deeper meanings pop out much more. Never studied silently." Interesting.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to
Panayoti, you're
say
my
to
boy,
that?
man.
Huh?
You're my boy, Panayoti. Pano, my boy. Love you, bro.
Yeah, Pano, again, everybody knows that he's the only person I've met in person in the Orthodox community. I'm kind of this lone ranger over here in Indiana, and he's the only fellow Hoosier that I know that's kind of consistent and up in our community here online. So shout out to Pano.
Yeah, he's like a little bridge, man. He's like a connector. I think he connects a lot of people kind of behind the scenes that I don't think people are aware of. You're doing good work, brother.
Yes, thank you, Pano.
Yes.
And thank you for the super chat and the support, brother. He also threw in another $3 and said, "So many Greeks have become desensitized to the treasure of orthodoxy that converts wish they always had. It pains me that they tend to regulate the church into a cultural ornament and not the body of Christ." As a Greek, can you speak to that? The sort of Greek identity, culturally speaking, with orthodoxy as opposed to the Orthodox lifestyle or Orthodox theology per se?
Yeah, I think that's changing. I think that's right. Just from my experience in talking with my family, I got cousins and family in Greece. In the village, or kind of a lot of my family's from, it's less than it's happening in the different cities. But there's YouTube channels of Greek brothers in Greece that are talking about these issues and returning to the church. So yeah, I've seen it happen. I'm not too familiar with it in terms of that milieu, but I think that's flipping as well. I hope, right. I pray.
Yeah. I think we all hope. What's going on in Greece just politically is hard to see as an Orthodox, with just the acceptance of the vaccine passport. I'm friends with somebody in Serbia who mentioned to me that I think Greece and Serbia are opening up their borders, but you either have to have the vaccine passport or a negative COVID test to pass between. And so we're already seeing the implementation of these passport gates to travel around the world, which is sad.
Find a good doctor friend of yours. Get an exemption. Get a mask exemption, or I got it. I'm good. Thread the needle ourselves, because I need to get back there. I'm trying to go next year to see my family. So I'm going to figure it out.
Right. I know. And I think that the system, I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like clearly not as many people are signing up for the stabby as they were hoping. And that's why they're trying to, lead people with the carrot of a Krispy Kreme donut or a bag of marijuana if you're in DC or whatever. But it's also obvious that the institutional power that is trying to implement this for global travel, for centralized tracking of people and movement, for a one world government. That's what it's all moving towards. Yet how the heck can they do that for everybody? Like, it doesn't make sense. There's too many people not wanting to do this, even people who aren't normie per se. I mean, I hear people that certainly don't align with my political values, but like, oh no, I'm not going to get a COVID vaccine. And it's like, well, shoot, if just say 40% of the country didn't get it, what are they going to do? I mean, that doesn't seem like they can do what people are also afraid of, but at the same time, you can see that they're trying to do that. So it's like, I don't know.
They're using the power of the crowd, man. Like, masks were a big debate, and then they became ubiquitous, and then you're a bad person if you don't wear it. Same thing will happen with the vaccine.
Yeah,
like the power of the crowd, just boom. Like, we'll have to thread the needle, and keep your sovereignty, man. I mean, I'm not anti-vaccine. If you're old, you want to get it, you get it. Like if you take the risk factors, you're a human being with sovereignty. If you ascertain that you should take it for your health, God bless you. But just to force everyone like this, it seems strange. Like, it's like, wait, yeah, it's, you're showing your hand too much now. So I'm not flinching.
Agreed. Pano threw in another 222 and said, "We don't go to church, we churchify our goings." I feel like that's a famous quote, but I'm not positive. I feel like I've heard that before. Shoot, may have been Pano. I'm not sure.
Love it.
But thank you, brother. Doorman360, I know who that gentleman is. Shout out to you, brother. Threw in $5 and said, regarding people suffering from same-sex attraction, they can participate in worship, but they must repent to commune, as Father Thomas Hopko of the OCA recommends. Same-sex sodomy is serious sin because it is an inversion of natural relations. So I'll let you respond. The first thing I would say to that is I am aware that, again, we are a hospital, so we hope that all homosexuals come to the church. It's not that we reject them from coming. We want them all to come. They do have to repent from the behavior and the activity. In regards to the same-sex sodomy as a serious sin, obviously it is the inversion of natural relations. Obviously, this is spoken directly in Romans 1 and Leviticus, so we have New and Old Testament scripture directly referring to this. But we as Orthodox also don't have the sort of gravity of different sins as the Catholics do. That in Dante's, I think I want to say the ninth sphere was for the sodomites and the usurers. And so they always, which is interesting, that sodomy and usury goes together. Both of them are an inversion of procreation, right? From Orthodox or just Christian theology, value is tied to labor. And so money has to be tied to labor. And as soon as money can be made from money, you're creating money from something that's not alive. A human person is alive. And so usury and sodomy, you can see, do have a lot of similarities. But at the same time, I know I'm a sexual sinner. I may not be sodomizing any man, that's for sure. But I have had quite a few of egregious sexual sins in my day. So that humbles a person. And so, yeah, it's like we have to live on this teetering edge of compassion and discernment, which is very, very difficult. So what do you have to say about the same-sex attraction, their repentance, and sodomy in general?
Yeah, I don't know enough to say it. Like, I don't know about weighing different sins against each other, but I think anybody that wants to become closer to God needs to repent. And everybody has their own, universal but unique inflamed passion and sin, right? So is homosexuality worse than adultery? It's in the 10 Commandments, right? What about murder? What about theft and stealing? What about being jealous of your neighbor's goods? Don't covet your neighbor's things, right? The base code of the 10 Commandments, right? I have failed at all of them, and I continue to fail at them. So I don't know why that would be worse. And I'm saying I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I don't know the particular scriptures that you're quoting there. So I don't know enough to speak to it, but my understanding is that I'm a sinner just as everybody else is. And I don't see about weighing other people's sins against each other. I think maybe there is a place for that, but I don't know that I can add value with that. I don't know that side. I can do that.
I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, but in Orthodoxy we may not, and again, I have no idea. I'm saying this that maybe somebody will reach out to me and give me more clarification in the future, because I know that we don't differentiate the sin based on their gravity in the same way. obviously certain sins have more gravity than others. When you go to confessions, your father, your spiritual father, I'm sure his eyebrows are going to widen more when you say you told a little white lie and you just committed adultery in your marriage. So obviously these things do have a sort of different gravity. And I wonder if Orthodoxy, again, not knowing, I would be interested for somebody to reach out to me that has more knowledge, would say that yes, all sin is equal and we do not differentiate sin, but the consequences of different sins are different to society and other people. Mm-hmm. And therefore that would give us a way to say both and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You see, because we could say, yeah, you're right. I'm a sexual sinner. You're a sexual sinner. Or even I'm not a sexual sinner. I have this sin. You have that sin. That we're equal. We're all sinners. But if my sin is contributing to more people moving away from God, than a sin that I'm the only one affected by, I can't help but think the church would say that has to have more gravity.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know. Maybe it's a question of intensity.
Either.
Maybe it's a question of intensity of the sin. And what's the biggest sin? Pride is the biggest sin.
Yeah,
right?
It's the mother of all. I mean, because
all
sin technically comes from the pride that we aren't obeying God in the first place.
And what do we have? Gay pride, right? Gay pride, is a very in your face type thing. And these, when Christ, or if Christ was here, he would probably go to them because they need love and healing. Not that maybe the intensity that is allowed to inflame that sexual passion. And there's a lot of suffering in the homosexual community, and even transgender community, right? Yes. Suicide and all that. And, I think that.
And abuse, previous abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse as children.
Yeah. So it's and again, hate the sin, love the sinner.
Right.
And when this community is wrought with fallen pride, I think it's leveraged against them, and they have individual sovereignty and whatnot as well. So it's not that simple. And again, I don't know that
I would need clergy to speak on this. I read a few books, I say a few words, but I am not clergy. I am not authoritative on any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Likewise. Yeah. Not even close.
Truth Eli threw in $10. Thank you so much, brother. Also another good Orthodox brother. And he said, enjoyed the chat. Blessings. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, the fulfillment of all truth. Amen to that, brother. Thank you so much for the $10 and your support. And our last one, it looks like, this is the last super chat, is from Nick Offinger. And it is $1.99, and he said, "Pole barn optimism, stay hyped." So Nick is another Orthodox convert, American, good Ortho bro, friends with him personally. And in previous streams, I said my future, what I'm trying to build is obviously make enough money that my wife doesn't have to work, that we can have a traditional home, and basically homestead is my 5 to 10 year plan. So that's what he's referring to as the pole barn optimism. Is that I'm willing to live in a pole barn. I'm going to furnish the thing out. I was trying to crunch numbers. Not everybody was as familiar with that passion or that goal, but yeah. So thank you, Nick, for the callback of probably about 6 months. So thank you very much for the $1.99, brother. And that basically concludes today's stream. So thank you all for coming in. Again, please go over to James Kourtides, his YouTube channel. Check out is your podcast on Apple, or can they get it all outside of YouTube?
I have it. It's just on YouTube, and okay. I'm not on Twitter or anything like that. Probably should be, but I just can't get into it.
What I would recommend to you, brother, is an easy way is just sign up with Spreaker. Mm-hmm. So there's a website called Spreaker.com. It's very simple. And so for the podcast, you can just take the audio of after you do your videos, you create an account, you just upload it there, and it will post your podcast in iTunes, on iHeartRadio, and Spotify. It'll do it on all these different platforms, so you don't have to sit there and try to upload your podcast on 7 different platforms. And so it's a very easy way, and again, because of the auditorial dimension of what you do, I think that would be a really... potentially a good opportunity to get more listeners, because it will promote it for you, basically.
Yeah, I'll check that out. I've been looking for something like that. So cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, guys, go check out his channel. Sub. Again, James, thank you so much, brother, for coming on another fantastic conversation.
Yeah.
God bless you and your family, man. Hope everything is well, and it seems like everything is moving in the right direction, God willing.
Yeah. God willing, man. Likewise. Appreciate you. Love you, man. Thanks for having me, and look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely.
God bless everyone.
Thank you so much, brother. And as always, until next, will actually be tomorrow. I'll be on tomorrow with Michael Sisko to talk about our Trad Forum in Indiana in June, where E. Michael Jones, Michael Witkoff, Luke Kindrat, Michael Sisko, and myself will all be speaking. So we're going to be promoting that event. To purchase tickets tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So we will see you guys then. Thank you, everyone who watched. Thank you for all the support. Thank you, James. And until next time, as always, God bless.